Have you ever heard these songs before and wonder who made them? Well, all these songs are by one Roy Chukwemeka Nawuji, otherwise known as Dean Blunt. Dean Blunt is one of the strangest enigmas of the music industry. Over his more than 15 years making music, he's done none of it by the books, and yet still collaborated with huge artists like Young Lean, Lil Yachty, and even A$AP Rocky. Despite this, he remains one of the most interesting people in the music industry, whether that be through his multiple pseudonyms that he releases music under, which varies in sound on and off streaming services, or his outside of music antics. I thought the best way to explore this would be through an iceberg. Everyone should know how an iceberg works at this point, so let's dive straight in to layer 1. Dean Blunt, real name Roy Chukwemeka Nawuji, was born in the beautiful mythical town of Hackney, London in the UK on the 8th of February 1984. While not much is known about his life in general, the least is known about his earlier life. However, his first band was most likely the indie outfit Graffiti Island. There's still footage on YouTube of him playing bass in the band. After this, Dean would form Hype Williams with artist Inga Copeland before branching off to start his own solo career. Solo, he would achieve major critic success. However, he hasn't stopped there. Wikipedia claims, not including Hype Williams, he's released over 40 projects, or at least been a part of them. For this intro, I didn't want to go that in depth, as the iceberg is kind of about him, as a lot of the stuff I would have talked about would have popped up later, such as Babyfather is an experimental hip-hop band fronted by Dean Blunt, including Gasman D, James Messiah, otherwise known as DJ Esco, and Dean himself. The band has a lot of mystery behind it, and it's even rumoured to just be Dean himself. The band has 2 albums, 2 mixtapes, and many singles. Their debut album, BBF, hosted by DJ Esco, was released in 2016, and their most recent single, released earlier this year. The first ever thing the band will release would be UK to UK, a mixtape, released in 2015 on SoundCloud, before 2016, their most active year. They dropped 2 albums through Hyperdub, those being 419 and the aforementioned BBF. 419 today is recognised as one of the more popular Dean Blunt albums. Before the year's over, they would also drop a single, Meditation, which is one of their most popular songs, and also another mixtape, Platinum Tears. Babyfather has seen decent critical acclaim, even through their more experimental tracks.
Burn the red light for this one, go straight for the ground.
Babyfather is probably Dean's most famous work that isn't his solo work. If not that, then probably. Hype Williams is an art and music group formed between Dean and Estonian singer Inga Copeland. Supposedly, however doubted, formed in 2005, they were most active from 2007 to 2012. The group has released 16 known official projects under the name Hype Williams. However, Black is Beautiful is an album done by the both of them, however it's attributed to them individually instead of Hype Williams. Not much is known about the band, as they didn't give many interviews or much information at all. However, they would officially break up in 2012, and both artists would go on to have solo careers. While theorized while they broke up, one explanation I found is from a deleted Reddit user. Inga is not the most easy communicative person from meeting her. I guess some things need to stay not clear. Isn't what Dean Blunt Hype Williams is about. It's about leaving enough space for you to enter. All I'm trying to say is it's good not to know. On the other side of the coin, some believe that The Redeemer, one of Dean's solo albums, is a breakup album between the two. Speaking of Inga Copeland. Inga Copeland is a Russian-Estonian experimental singer, and one of Dean's most frequent collaborators. She was a part of the aforementioned Hype Williams, and in the early works of Dean, she was all over his albums. These days, the two don't collaborate as frequently, and she goes under the name Lilina for her solo work. Joanne Robertson is commonly joked to be Inga Copeland's replacement. The UK native started collaborating with Dean around 2013, and they work together today. They even have an album together. But she also has a solo career. She recently released an album called Blur to a lot of critical success. 100 is by far Dean's most popular song. You can tell this because it has a Wikipedia article. This is in part thanks to TikTok. The song was originally released in April of 2015 as a promotional single for the album Black Metal, where it was the 4th track. The song revolves around a sample from Over My Shoulder by the Pastels. The song actually has quite an unknown official music video. The video opens with a negative review from Idris Elba on one of Dean's albums, before cutting to cinematic shots of Dean and his bodyguard driving in a car. The reason for the video not being as well known is that it was taken down from YouTube for unknown reasons, though it was probably taken down by Dean himself, as he's known to do. Black Metal 1, The Redeemer, and Black Metal 2 are three of Dean's most popular albums. The Redeemer, the first of the few to release, was released in 2013 and follows themes of religion and love, while Black Metal, released in November of 2014, has a very dreamy aesthetic sound. However, it lacks concrete themes, which is something that the sequel, Black Metal 2, also does. If you're watching this video, you've probably listened to at least one of the three, but if you haven't, you should probably listen to Black Metal 2, which is my favourite of the three. However, Black Metal 1 is definitely his most popular, but you should do that after this video. Bar Italia is a three-piece based in London, comprising of Nina Cristante, Jasmine Tariq Femi, and Sam Fenton. Though they've kept a low profile, it's known that the trio started working around late 2019, around the time of the Big Cough. The band would release their debut album Crawl in 2020, followed by The Head in 2021. These two albums are notable to Dean because they're under World Music. However, in early 2023, Dean Blunt and one of the members of the band, Nina, would get into a heated back and forth on Instagram. This occurred because Nina's solo work had been taken off Spotify, and it was rumoured that Dean had done it himself due to a bad breakup between Nina and him. Nowadays, they're no longer affiliated with World Music and signed to Matador Records. Dean Blunt and A$AP Rocky have a significant collaboration history, with Blunt producing for Rocky's album Testing, and Rocky's featured on some of Dean's songs, like Stoozy and the opening track The Soul on Fire. It's even been confirmed that Dean Blunt will be a producer on A$AP Rocky's up-and-coming album Don't Be Dumb, if it ever does come out. Their relationship probably sprung from Rocky working in the UK for his album Testing. There are a few clips of the two working in the studio, and there's also a clip of Rocky and Tyler freestyling over a Babyfather beat. Nina Cristante is an Italian-born singer-songwriter and the front singer of the aforementioned band Bar Italia. She also has a successful solo career. Now, as I mentioned in the Bar Italia segment of this iceberg, the band was signed to World Music, which is Dean's record label. However, they would leave in 2023 after Nina and Dean broke up. Zushi is one of Dean Blunt's solo albums released in 2020, which you may know if the fuck-ass Drew Hill Dragon on the album cover. It was originally aired on a radio show by Dean's label World Music. The original stream had every song titled Zushi alongside its track number placement. Zushi.zip was then hosted on WeTransfer for a week. When it was originally released on streaming services, some songs weren't given a proper title. The ones that didn't were just titled after their placement, such as 1 or 2. Zushi is definitely Dean's most star-studded album, if you will. It features from the aforementioned A$AP Rocky, Young Lean, and even fucking French Montana. Though not his best album in my opinion, it definitely has some high highs, that aforementioned Young Lean feature in particular. Definitely has some high highs. Blue Iverson is a project and alias used by Dean Blunt. It's mainly known for its sole release on streaming services, that being 2017's Hotep, known for its obligatory Lauryn Hill album cover. The album has a very nice, dreamy, jazzy sound, and wouldn't be out of place in any coffee shop. This is helped brought out by the vocalist Jenna Bell, who is featured on a few songs on Hotep. As mentioned before, there's not much music by Blue Iverson. However, Kerosene Skunk Funk replaces Brown Girl on the track list on the very limited vinyl release of the album. And there's also a song called Bow Bow Bow, which is exclusive to the Bandcamp release of the album. World Music 419 refers to two things. However, the first one I think it refers to more, the second one I'm just going to talk about. Number one, it refers to his Instagram username, World Music 419. This is the handle that he goes under. Currently his Instagram account is deactivated, but he activates it and deactivates it a lot. However, recently it's been deactivated for the longest time. I believe it's also his Twitter handle, but I don't use Twitter, so I wouldn't know. This also commonly gets confused with the World Music Instagram page, which isn't official, but basically is treated like it is. The person who runs it is very respected in the Dean Blunt community. And the second thing that this entry could be referring to is the World Music label as a whole. Dean Blunt's music label is called World Music, as I mentioned in the Bar Italia and whole Nina segment, and it's how he releases his music and signs very few artists. Enemy Award imposter refers to a stunt that Dean pulled at the 2015 Enemy Awards. However, instead of reciting it myself, I want to read you an article from the Fader from the time. At last night's Enemy Awards in London, Dean Blunt was awarded the Philip Hall Radar Award, but he wasn't on site to accept it. Instead, an unnamed stand-in in a military jacket accepted the award in his place. On the night of February 18th, 2015, Jarvis Cocker, lead singer of Pulp and writer of one of the best songs ever, would take to the stage to award the aforementioned Philip Hall Radar Award. And well, I'll just play what happens next.
Envelopes. I first became aware of this person when I was doing my radio program on Six Music. Suddenly came across this weird CD with some praying hands on the front. Listened to it, didn't sound like anything I'd heard before. Then he's gone on to do a lot more stuff. It makes me very, very proud to award the Philip Hall Radar Award to Dean Blunt.
Thanks to the man upstairs, God Almighty. Thanks to Enemy. I finally made it. Power!
Thanks to the man upstairs, thanks Enemy, I finally made it. We are not sure if Blunt wrote that speech for him, but he clearly enjoys taking the piss out of critics. Idris Elba threw some shots in the review for Noisy. Oh, we talked about that in the 100. And Blunt opened his latest video 100 with a full transcript of his comments. The Crying Nudes are one of the bands signed to the World Music label. While the studio lineup is rumoured, the theorised members are Dean, Vegin, and then the confirmed vocalist is Fine Glindvad. Though Dean Blunt is most likely in the band, due to him always posting it on his official YouTube channel. There has been one self-titled album released under the pseudonym and a bunch of singles. Stalker refers to a song Dean Blunt released in 2020. Now, let me set the scene. You click play on the song and are met with a short sample of the song Swing My Way by KP and NB, with the phrase, "I've been watching you," taken from the sample, repeated over and over. You wait for the vocals, but they never come. You check the duration of the song, and you see it's 1 hour long. It is repeated 686 times. Despite the jokey nature of the song, it actually has quite an extensive history, being described as a long-running inside joke by a Rate Your Music user. It would briefly appear at minute 9:39, all the way back from the Dior EP by Hype Williams, which was released in 2010. The single by Dean Blunt wouldn't release until 2020. However, it's probably most well known for the series on YouTube, where it was played a bunch in the background of videos of Dean in awkward scenarios. The videos would only be about 10 seconds long. There are too many to count, but it was definitely around like 15 or something like that. Soul on Fire was a 16-minute long album released in 2018 by Dean Blunt. When the album originally released, it would only have 9 songs, but when it came to streaming services, they would add an additional song, Somalia Park. Overall, the album had a pretty laid-back sound and didn't have too many instruments. However, the first song, Chancer, is quite popular for featuring A$AP Rocky. The album also had a pretty limited release on vinyl in 2023 on the iGoChoppy.dollar website. Roach's 2012 to 2019 is a compilation of rarities and unreleased songs that Dean Blunt released in May of 2020. There are 3 distinct versions of Roach's 2012 to 2019. The normal version, the deluxe, and the super deluxe. Though this is far from how many were actually released. As far as I can tell, there were more than 6 versions that were out there at some point, with a grand total of 58 songs being on it at some point or another. Some versions just had chained track names, some versions had a completely chained track list, some removed songs. However, today, you can find the normal version on Spotify, you can find the deluxe version slightly edited on Spotify. However, the super deluxe is kept for the real fans, as you have to go to Google and then figure it out. Babyfather mixtapes refers to 2 things. Number 1, it could be referring to the Dean Blunt album or mixtape titled Babyfather that released in 2015 under Hyperdub. This was around the time that the band Babyfather was coming into existence, and he just named the mixtape album. There's not much to the album, it's quite boring. The second thing that this entry could be referring to is the band Babyfather's mixtapes. Babyfather has 5 projects that are mixtape length, and through my research, it's quite hard to decipher which ones are officially albums and which ones are officially mixtapes. However, through my research, I've conducted that UK to UK is a mixtape, Platinum Tears is a mixtape, and 2017's Cypher is a mixtape. That said, I don't think anyone knows what Cypher truly is. Black is Beautiful is a 15-track collaborative album between Dean Blunt and Inga Copeland, released under Hyperdub. The album sounds like a more acoustic Hype Williams, and it is Hype Williams in everything except for name. The album would have quite an expansive physical release, including Japanese CDs and vinyls. The Attitude Era refers to a compilation album done by Hype Williams. The album was released with a note. I'll now read it. Desktop tunes, finished/unfinished. Sorry to anyone we promised these tunes to. Cannot deal with them anymore. Start again. From Dean and Inga. Originally given to the British newspaper article The Guardian as a free download exclusively for 2 weeks, the Attitude Era is made up of demos, unreleased cuts, and scrapped collaborations from the Narcissist 2 and the One Nation era. As all the tracks were placed in a folder with no order, the album is often organised alphabetically. However, all the songs are officially unnumbered. Dina Francis Glass is Dean Blunt's current official YouTube channel, even though he deactivates it and reactivates it like he does with a lot of his social media accounts. As far as I can tell, it's currently deactivated, as I can't seem to find it anywhere. But even if it wasn't, that wouldn't be much help, as he usually deletes the videos pretty fast after uploading them. Many of the videos are archived, although there's probably some that are just lost to time. You can find a lot of the re-uploads on probably Chase's channel, which is where all the B-roll footage that you're seeing in the background of this video is coming from. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, as this does tie into something on the final layer of the iceberg, but I do want to talk about the origin of the name Dina Francis Glass, and how it most likely derives from a third member of Hype Williams. Dina Francis Glass and the origins of Hype Williams. New to the Dean Blunt multiverse, just wanted some things cleared up. So Hype Williams was supposedly created by someone by the name of Dina Francis Glass in 2005, which Dean Blunt and Inga later joined. But I realised that Dina Francis Glass is the name of the Dean Blunt YouTube channel, so I'm assuming that confirms that Hype Williams was created, or at least started, by Dina and Inga. Our response to this Reddit thread would state, it could mean anything to be fair. Copeland was Dean Blunt's SoundCloud for a month after Hype Williams split up, for example. Polly Jacobson refers to another one of Dean Blunt's YouTube channels. This was used more around the Hype Williams era. A Reddit user, who's actually going to get a big shout out later, put it best. Dina Francis Glass is his main and his current YouTube channel. Probably Chase is not him, but a fan who uploads the old stuff. And Polly Jacobson was the old Hype Williams channel. There exists an archive account. Another Reddit user would point out the Roy Bundy channel. That's most likely him, but it is debatable. Many classics would come from the Polly Jacobson channel, such as the One Nation trailer.
When I die, don't...
Jesus Christ 3000 ADHD refers to Dean Blunt's SoundCloud name. He'd drop a few exclusive songs on here, the most popular of which being As Long as Ropes Unravel, Fake Rolexes We Travel. Though he did drop a few songs on here. Though he didn't just use the name for the SoundCloud, he'd also go under it sometimes. Most specifically on NTS Radio. Bocat Eternal True Family Band refers to, as described by a Reddit user, an ensemble that eventually spawned Hype Williams. They had a few more people in it, as well as Dean and Inga. There are videos out there. The video in question showed this group of people playing these tribal drums over long droning notes. I'll play you one now. Panda Bear music video refers to the music video for Token by Panda Bear, member of Animal Collective, who you might know for being the vocalist on 9, one of Dean's biggest songs. This relates to Dean, as this is some of the clearest footage we have of him, as funnily enough the video follows him around a carnival as he plays games and walks through stuff like halls of mirrors. The following message opens the video. He, referring to Dean, had plans to make something about Toy Story, then something about cowboys and cowgirls. Then he lost his fucking mind. So we decided to scrap all the stuff he had planned and try and make him have some fun and smile. Please wish Dean a good luck with his recovery. XX. Panda Bear has spoken on the two's relationship and has said how they've barely met in person. They played a festival together and talked for a bit, but most of their relationship has been online through mutual respect of one another's work. Interesting thing about this video is if you go to the description, you can see that it says director Dean Blunt, camera Dina Francis Glass, and editor Nita Cristante, which if you take what I said about Dina Francis Glass earlier. So Silverman and Slaughter literally refers to this picture, which Hype Williams used a lot, most notably as their Spotify profile picture for a bit. I can't for the life of me find any information on these two people and who they are. Well, they're probably Silverman and Slaughter, but you get what I mean, what they do, and also why Hype Williams would use this photo. Upon additional research, all I could really find was that apparently Silverman was all over the new Nina project, so that could really mean anything. Delete the Devil feud refers to something we've already talked twice about, but when Dean deleted Nina's music off streaming services. It refers to this screenshot in particular. When your white ex tells you she's superior to you, yes, you get petty and delete the Devil. Last on this, die slow. Teens of Thailand refers to the alias/band that Dean was a part of with probably the least amount of information. A college radio station would describe Teens of Thailand as an alias of Blunts that is conspired about on Reddit to be an alias that gained less success, which is why it's much harder to find. It really only exists on Reddit or Rate Your Music. For reference, it was probably after Graffiti Island, which was Dean's first band. However, also for reference on how little is known about them. It's the only thing that Dean is a member of on Rate Your Music that doesn't have its own dedicated page. 1995 Epilepsy is by far the most mysterious thing to come from the world music label. With one sole release on Spotify being their self-titled album, and with nearly 1,000 monthly listeners, there is not much known about 1995 Epilepsy. The album, surprisingly enough, saw a vinyl release, and suppliers would leave us with this message. Who, we hear you ask? Us too. All we know about the enigma of 1995 Epilepsy is that it is in some obscure way a project linked to Dean Blunt, which isn't too surprising. Tug of War and Liberties play with the drum and bass styles without quite falling within the remit, thanks to an air of DIY lo-fi tactics. Grows, molds its... what the fuck? Whoever it might be behind 1995 Epilepsy, they've convinced a fever dream beyond the realms of even the imagination of those who are furthest left field. The only other bit of information available is the album cover. I went to the doctors. They said when you were last here it was 2014, and I said that seems like a while ago. They said, and you're epileptic. I said no, and they said wait, what's your name? I told them, and they said yeah, this is you. Turned around the screen, and it said 1995 Epilepsy. Bill Cosby XXX VHS tape refers to a compilation of a bunch of Hype Williams videos of the sort that came out in 2011. It has music videos and all other types of things. It's a little over 30 minutes long and contains Untitled 3, 7, Chatline, William Shotgun Sprayer, Your Girl Smells Chung, Over, Blue Dream, Rescue Dawn 3, Shank 2009, Han Dynasty Part 3, and even fucking Stalker. It was released under Italian label Hundibus and limited to 300 copies. It was described as an exclusive collection of the Hype Williams video work, probably the most genuine reflections of pop culture mixed with hyper-contemporary obsessions of domestic self-representation. Here you can find a massive exploitation of the long takes and deliberate use of digital folklore. Most of these videos originally sprung from the aforementioned Hype Williams YouTube channel. However, today you can find it re-uploaded entirely on YouTube. $360 toy evil grass car would refer to when in January of 2016, Dean Blunt would take to eBay to do the following. I will now read the description. Dean Blunt 2016, 1 to 18 scale, Foxton's Mini Cooper, 1 kilogram UK wheat cheese, 7 times 3.3 inches, limited edition of 10, signed under bonnet, includes cert of authenticity, made in London, UK. Even though his name was in the description, people were skeptical that it was Dean at first, until Hyperdub would confirm in an email that it was him. As for the car, it would have an interesting paint job and a cracked windscreen. And in the boot, it would have 1 kilogram of cheese. Before Dean's car could fly off the shelf, it was taken down from eBay predictably. It was relisted on Craigslist later that week. As you can see from the photo of the listing, there were 4 available cars on eBay. However, the description does say limited edition of 10, so there may have been 10. It's unknown how many of the cars actually sold, or if they sold at all. However, one did appear at the SE1 3AW World Music Art Installation. Watch the Throne collab with James Ferraro refers to a collab that Dean did with his Hippos and Tank label mate James Ferraro. The album in question is an 18-minute ambient piano piece, recorded at Soho House, West Hollywood, on the edge of Beverly Hills on the 3rd of November 2012. It was released on November 11th of that same year as an MP3 without any album art. As for the piece itself, as I touched on briefly before, it's a very bare bones, fragile piano piece where you can hear the ambience of the people around them as they perform it, with a lot of chatter going on. It's almost like it's being played at like a fancy bar, which is probably where it was being performed, to be fair. There also exists a 40-minute 2013 bootleg, creatively titled Watch the Throne 2, where it's very similar ambience-wise. You can tell they're performing it in a public place, as you can still hear chatter and stuff. Sonically, it's pretty similar, with only a keyboard and piano being used. However, like I said, this is 40 minutes and a lot more fleshed out. There's even a cover of Molly and Aquafina around the 11-minute mark. As for the chances of Watch the Throne 3, the two aren't theorized to be on not as good terms as they used to, which means they will probably never happen, which is quite sad, as the pieces are very unique in Dean's catalogue, and they're quite good and very calming. Disaster Piece refers to a 32-page script written by Dean Blunt. The story, as described by Goodreads, follows a character named Raven, a young up-and-coming musician from southeast London who suffers from divine headaches that feel like an LSD trip, minus the chemicals. The script will also be accompanied with 3 songs released by Dean, meant to accompany the script. The script itself is quite nonsensical and quite trippy, and the script also has a lot of photos with it that remind me at least of those that you'd see on a website like LHOHQ or something like that. Many tied to religion, or some are just random stock photos. The piece has a few reviews, though they're probably by Dean's fans, so as you can tell they skew pretty high. After reading and skimming through a bit of it, it seems pretty strange, but if you got half an hour on your hands, go give it a read. Headaches merch, I believe, refers to the very limited friends and family Dean Blunt merch releases that he does. Due to the lack of information about this online, I want to take you through a quick trip of some of Dean's known clothing releases. The first piece I'd like to talk about are these 2 friends and family name and face front hit pieces. From what I can tell, the official version of these tees feature a hit on the sleeve reading P4K 43 V3R. The white tee has been seen on Skepta twice, while the black one has been seen on Savior of Music and Netspend. The next piece I want to talk on very swiftly is this hoodie. Apparently Dean designed it. While on the subject of hoodies, this Zushi logo hoodie came out through Org, which if you don't know is A$AP Rocky's label. It'd also be featured in an A$AP Rocky music video, along with someone in a Zushi tank top. Now lastly, though there are probably more, I want to talk about Dean's relationship with Supreme. While you probably all know the tee with his face on it, what you probably might not know is this Soul on Fire long sleeve, which was in the works long before the face tee. It's unknown if the tee will ever come out, because it's quite old. Hype Williams is a relay project. It's pretty self-explanatory. A relay project is usually a group or a band that has a rotating cast of members. Think Fleetwood Mac or maybe even Queens of the Stone Age. However, the idea of Hype Williams being a relay project ties into what I was talking about earlier with Dean and Inga not being the original members of Hype Williams. This comes from the Wikipedia article for Hype Williams, stating, supposedly founded in 2005 as a relay project, passed between artists every 5 years, the group has given few interviews, leaving music journalists and the media in doubt as the exact nature of the project. Fact Magazine, in a Hype Williams interview from 2011, would state that Hype Williams is in fact a relay project, curated and possibly founded by one Dina Francis Glass, which is what we touched on earlier, and that Copeland and Blunt are simply the current baton holders. Who knows? Inner opera refers to the 40-minute opera play, as described in the description, directed by Dean Blunt, with music by Mika Levy, because anything's possible, or anything is possible. The opera is entitled Inner and is a collaboration between Dean and artist Mika Levy. Now, I'm gonna level with you. I sat through about 10 minutes of this and just couldn't wrap my head around it. It was way too abstract to me. I'll play you a snippet. There's droning notes that play throughout the whole thing that really encapsulate the eerie visuals, along with guitars cutting in and out. Someone that went to the opera would describe it as this. Everything was beautiful and nothing mattered, probably. Much like all, the best experience in life, love, and music, to describe it is too much to ruin it. You had to be there. Triumph Allah and Grassman D identities refers to the two main members of Babyfather that aren't Dean and DJ Escrow. The two don't have that much to do with the music at first glance. They have very limited features on the actual songs, and if they do stuff, it's behind the scenes like mixing and stuff. This has led to greater theories that they actually made up and don't exist. However, we'll start with Grassman D, as he most likely does exist. As in this photo, he's the person in the middle. Grassman D is theorized to be the man that provides the gas. He's also well known for handing out balloons at the Babyfather shows. It's got to the point that on Reddit, one of the only threads about him is just asking if the only reason why he's in the band is because Dean thought it'd be funny to have someone addicted to balloons. However, if you head on over to NTS Radio, there's an artist called, topically, the Gaza Strip. This is Grassman D. However, for Babyfather, Grassman D will always just be the hype man. However, Triumph Allah, on the other hand, goes under the name Lord Tusks, with many albums since 2015 on Rate Your Music. While a hype man similarly to Grassman D, he features on a lot of songs behind the scenes, doing mixing and stuff like that. For example, when Skywalker Freestyle was originally released on Jesus Christ 3000 SoundCloud, he was credited by name as a feature, even though the song doesn't have any features. I also thought it'd be good to say that Grassman D and Triumph Allah both appear in the music video for Kill Illuminati, alongside DJ Escrow and Dean Blunt, just in case anyone still thought they didn't exist. The 4 Agreements refers to Dean Blunt's part in a self-help book called Helping Yourself 2020, which a group of artists participated in. Helping Yourself 2020 is a resource of self-help material by artists sharing personal tips for coping and healing strategies. Dean and Nina would participate in this, with Dean's most famous excerpt from it being this: "Lose all attachment however you understand this. It doesn't mean being selfish. A lot of pain comes from attachments. Attachments to belief, feelings, or people. Follow the 4 agreements." The first agreement: be impeccable with your word. The second agreement: don't take anything personally. The third agreement: don't make assumptions. The fourth agreement: always do your best. Dean would actually, as put by one Reddit user, sample this from Don Miguel Ruiz's book from 1997 titled The 4 Agreements. Heal in Touch with a Sister, or as more commonly known from what I can tell, as Seal IV/Pumplex, refers to a 24-minute CDR released by Hype Williams. Not much is known about this release. It was released in May of 2011, and the cover art that belongs in a museum was designed by a man called Dimitri Karakostas. Throughout its 24 minutes, you're greeted with how to smoke a blunt, some ambience, and then some common Hype William drum patterns. Originally when released, it was hand-numbered of 40 and only released in Middle East and mainland Europe. However, it's been ripped and is now uploaded online. However, while in research, I found this article from dmy.com stating, "This, which landed in our inboxes with a SoundCloud link, nothing more, seems to be a live session from London duo Hype Williams, recorded last December in New York. Upon further inquiry, this was emailed over. Hey, just a session they did in NY. Dean got stuck in the US due to some sticky situation with robbing a taxidermist. Anyway, this will explain why the EP has 2 names." Sukul Juked refers to a YouTube channel that Dean used that was most active from 2016 to 2017. While the channel is predictably deactivated today, you can see in snapshots from back in 2017 that this channel is pretty notable for being the first place where albums like Hotep and Wahala were released. Some other songs also had their first ever release on here, such as Benadorm and apparently Snake Man Freestyle. However, this video is the most interesting thing I came across. Lord Knows refers to another one of Dean's plays that was staged under Hype Williams, back in 2012. It was staged in Lausanne, Switzerland, following a Hype Williams show, and there was a black and white photo gallery of the performance. Not much is known about the play. However, a writer of The Wire described how they often confront straightforward questions with sarcasm and hip-hop name drops. There remains no known footage of the event, only the aforementioned photo gallery, leaving what happened during the play up to your imagination. Mud refers to a performance art piece conducted by Dean Blunt and Nina Cristante. I will now read the text accompanied with the piece. Man is being spoken to by another man facing him explaining something. Woman keeps coming up to spoken to man to his right side. She approaches him in a chess horse L shape, passing the other man, who continues to explain. She is about to say something, but can't manage to say anything, then returns in the direction she came. She continues this ad information, trying different ways to express, but failing. Man notices her as other guy who doesn't, continues yapping away, and is accompanied with this photo. This piece goes on for 8 minutes until she eventually falls over and it fades to black. This took place in Paris, as the YouTube description says, and there's not much known about it. It's pretty nonsensical. 419 cover origin refers to if you go onto YouTube and look up the rise of money launderers on Snapchat and Instagram, you see this video, posted by Vice. Now, if you skip to the 5-minute and 49-second mark, you see this.
Quick cash, and I followed every single page that's come up, and I've started DMing potential recruiters, asking them, how do I get involved, basically.
Now then, if you're this deep in the video and still don't know what this photo is, this is the album cover for 419 by Babyfather. However, the Vice documentary came out in 2021, and Babyfather's 419 came out in 2016, meaning that he got this photo without the documentary. However, 419 by Babyfather would be released in November of 2016, and if you look at the actual Instagram post from the documentary, you can see it was released on May of 2016, meaning that either Dean found the photo without Instagram, Dean saw the post itself, or even scarier, Dean posted it himself. This would mean that getting_quick_cash_Leon is actually Dean. Which, jokes aside, isn't out of the question. 419 does get its origins from the code that Jamaican police use for fraud. What I will say though, is if it is actually Dean, he's not very discreet about it.
Gambling is a game that we play.
Hype Williams' occult/satanic themes is pretty self-explanatory. However, a lot of these themes appear in Dean's solo work as well. However, sticking to Hype Williams, you can see in a lot of their shows that have red lights and just overall pretty occult vibes. However, for Hype Williams, these vibes are most apparent on track 2 of the 2009 EP, High Beams, in the song Karen Hates the Forest, where Inga sings 666, I'm gonna do it. However, this song comes off more sarcastic than anything, making fun of people that believe rituals and magic and stuff like that really exist. For Hype Williams, that's kinda where the Satanist allegations end. However, for Dean's solo work, this is just where they begin. Let's start small and work our way up. In the music video for Stoozy, featuring A$AP Rocky, you can see Dean do this demon devil horn hand gesture thingy. However, if you want to explain this away, you can say that it's referencing the line said before in the song, right before he does it, which is sell your soul, that's the price of fame. So you can maybe say that Dean's just referencing this line. However, for 2018's Soul on Fire, you can see the cover depict this demon-type figure. I've tried my hardest to find the origin of this. The closest I could find is this image, however I think it was made after the album came out. Not to mention the title of the album literally being Soul on Fire. Also, in the aforementioned 4 Agreements text, Dean says this: I was brought up Catholic, the source of Western evil. I feel there is a deep benefit of learning and unlearning all that stuff. Climbing out of the barrel of fear. Fear and love is all there is. Heaven isn't a physical place, neither is hell. However, just because he doesn't believe in the Catholic religion, doesn't mean necessarily that he's a Satanist. However, if you must subscribe to the theory that Dean Blunt is a Satanist, the most compelling piece is his song, Darkest, which would release on Adult Swim in a compilation from 2019. Dean and Adult Swim's relationship, on a side note, is something that I'm surprised didn't pop up here, as a few of the Black is Beautiful songs would be used as bumpers. However, back to the topic at hand, the lyrics are Lucifer, Lucifer, Prince of Darkness, and I have the video playing right now. Just look at it, and I think you can tell why I believe it's a little bit satanic. I also wanted to briefly mention the inner opera that I mentioned before in the other layer. as I mean, looking at the visuals is a bit satanic. In conclusion, I don't believe that Dean Blunt is a Satanist, as much as I do believe that he doesn't like the Christian religion and uses Satanism to provoke them. For the final entry on the final layer of the iceberg, we have Hype Williams' third member kicked out. Now, for this entry, this is the deepest I've ever gone into any subject, period, on this channel. Like, some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is borderline new information. So get comfy, as we're going to fill in all the gaps from throughout this iceberg of the stuff that I wasn't sure about and uncover some new information. And also, the dude whose Instagram I'm throwing up on the screen right now, none of this would be possible without him. He's going to get a much big shout out later on.
Also, it's going to get pretty confusing. So if you're confused about what kind of saga we're in, look to the top left. And if you're confused about what year or time frame we're in, look to the top right.
But now let's begin and start off with Dean's early years.
Now, all we know from this time frame, other than the fact that Dean grew up in Hackney, is that he wasn't really into music until he was 18. So let's do a big time skip to 2005, as that's when Dean really started getting into music. However, let's forget about Dean for a second. 2005 is notable, because if we're following the Hype Williams law, this is when Hype Williams was created by Father Ronnie Crayola and Denna Francis Glass. Now this is where in the story things start getting properly confusing. Now, we need to make a very early distinction. There are two sides of Hype Williams. There's the quote-unquote law, and there's what actually happened. We don't need to worry about what actually happened until near the end of this segment. So for now, in the law, this is what's happening with Hype Williams.
So now, if we play into the law, and what I said previously about Hype Williams being a relay project, where the cast gets switched out every 5 years, Denna Francis Glass and Father Ronnie Crayola have just begun their 5-year stint. But now, I need to be very clear. None of this information comes from Father Ronnie and Denna Francis firsthand. All this information comes from Dean and Inga and their associates. Just bear that in your mind as we continue going on. Now, back to Dean. Now, in 2005, Dean would form or be a part of his first ever project called Boom Boom Bye. Despite I said earlier, and what many may believe, Graffiti Island isn't actually the first band that we know Dean was a part of. It's Boom Boom Bye. Boom Boom Bye would be reported on in a fashion blog in 2017. However, that blog's archive would be reset in 2017, so there's basically no information on Boom Boom Bye. Moving on to 2006, which is a pretty short year for what we know of Dean, Dean would be a part of Graffiti Island, which I'd best describe as an indie rock band, and is nothing like Dean would do in the future. Dean was the bassist and presumably helped form the band, however he wasn't with them for long. He wasn't even on the band's first 7-inch. They'd split most likely due to creative differences, and they'd go on without Dean. Now, starting the road to 2009, we have the Teens of Thailand arc. Teens of Thailand was the aforementioned band, which was a DJ duo two-piece, where Dean was one of the members and the second member is unknown. There exist a few screenshots of their MySpace and a few photos of them. They were relatively successful for their time in the scene, and they lasted a while too, and they'd play a few shows. Now, at some point in between this time, Dean Blunt started working at the ISA Gallery in London, where he would put on his first few performance art piece shows. Teens of Thailand would usually perform at these shows, and in a blog by ISA, Dean would be interviewed on his thought process behind the shows, and how he's not really into bigger groups doing stuff at these shows, and is why he chooses to perform with Teens of Thailand. Now it's around this point where Inga finally enters the picture. At this point, she's studying at Central St. Martin's College in the UK. Now we can imagine, since the two were into the arts, they probably met at some art or music related event. And from this point onwards, they pretty much do everything together until, spoiler alert, around 2013. The specifics of their relationship are best not to conspire on. However, what you should know is that at this point, Inga is putting on art exhibitions under the name Salem, thus entering the Salem arc. Salem's first exhibition would be called Magic and Happiness, and would revolve around speaking on art and the philosophy of art. The event would run from the 18th of November to the 22nd of November 2009, and there exists a few photos of the event. Now, Salem would only do about 3 or 4 shows, but it's pretty integral in Dean and Inga's story, as obviously it was ran by Inga, and Dean was pretty involved in it. Some of the things that would happen at these exhibitions involve a pile of fish in the doorway, hooded figures shadowboxing, and people's faces moulded out of tinfoil. Now, it's around this point that you can see some of the members of BoCat popping up in and around these Salem events. However, the last thing I want to talk about for the Salem arc is a very, very short-lived band called Purple Knife that Dean was a part of. Literally all that exists right now is a screenshot of one of their music videos. Now we can finally move on to BoCat. BoCat is made up of at least two groups, those definitely being Hype Williams and a band called Hounds of Hate. Now what BoCat would do is every Wednesday they'd basically get zooted and then perform these really long songs like the one that I played you before. Now BoCat wouldn't really do anything. They'd practice, but they wouldn't release any EPs or albums, and eventually as Salem started to die out, BoCat would die with it. However, as we all know, that's not where the story would end. Now before we finally move on to Hype Williams, the last thing we need to mention is the Salem Project's website. On this website, there were lots of things listed for sale to do with Salem and Hype Williams. However, the most notable thing is for £100, you could buy Denner Francis Glass and Roy Naruji Untitled brackets Dexter. And for £12, Denner Francis Glass Process 2008. Now what these are unclear, especially since both of these haven't been archived or surfaced. However, the first one off the name is definitely maybe music. Now finally, we get stage one of Dean and Inga's Hype Williams. This is very early on in their career, and is still spiritually BoCat. This is around the Han Dynasty, High Beams, and the original Untitled album era. Just to give you an example of how close this era of Hype Williams and BoCat were, tracks 4 and 5 off the original Untitled album both have credits to the BoCat Eternal Truth family band. Now, if you've ever seen a video of the band performing at this point in their career, you may have seen a third man playing the guitar. And this is Arch M. And putting it bluntly, if you ever wanted to consider a Hype Williams third member, or say that they did have one, this is him. This is Hype Williams' third member. Arch M would upload a now taken down YouTube video where he'd talk about Hype Williams. However, it's been transcribed. He'd talk about how he's the founding member, has an unreleased album, and he left the band. He'd also give his email while asking people to email him questions. While we don't have a concrete reason on why he left, we can imagine that it was due to creative differences, as this leads us into stage 2 of Dean and Inga's Hype Williams, where they'd go electronic. Arch M presumably wanted to stay with the Eternal Truth family band sound that they had going on. Arch M would stay for a little longer before either leaving or being kicked out. After this, Dean and Inga would move to Berlin and start doing shows all over Europe. Now around this time they were dropping like Find Out What Happens, One Nation, those type of albums. Now this leads us into the final part of Dean and Inga's Hype Williams, the Hyperdub stage. Now as the aforementioned Hyperdub came into the frame and signed the two, they released Black is Beautiful, their final album together. The reason why it's attributed to them separately instead of Hype Williams is because if they use the name Hype Williams under a proper label, they'd probably get sued. And this leads us to 2013, where for whatever reason you believe, the two would split up. Now, this should be where the story ends. However, in the late 2010s, Dean would go on a bit of a nostalgia trip. In 2018, Hype Williams would release Rainbow Edition. Dean and Nina would both make this in LA. Bear that in mind, Dean and Nina. And also in 2018, BoCat Eternal Truth family band would release an EP through World Music. Now whether the original members of the band made it is unclear. However, because it was released through World Music, Dean at least had to sign off on it. Now in 2020, BoCat would release another EP, and Hype Williams would release the compilation Else, which is made up of the album 1010 and the EP Gucci Streams 2, which were both from the Dean and Inga era. Keep that in mind, a 2020 release with songs from Dean and Inga era. An interesting thing to note is that both BoCat EPs are around the 20-minute mark. Back in the day, one BoCat song would be around 20 minutes, and all the EPs are made up of like 6 songs. Just an interesting thing to note. Now we can finally tie this information together. So, remember Silverman and Slaughter from earlier in the ICEBERG? Well, these two are apparently the current patent holders of the name Hype Williams in the law. This would mean in the law that there has been 3 known relays between people under the name Hype Williams. That being Denner Francis Glass and Father Rodney Crayola, to Dean and Inga, to Silverman and Slaughter. But now we get to the most important part of this entry. I'm going to explain to you why Silverman and Slaughter, Father Rodney, and most importantly, Dina Francis Glass, don't exist. First of all, the 5-year time frame doesn't work. If the band was supposedly founded by Dina Francis Glass in 2005, why did Dean and Inga start making music under the name in 2009? That's a 4-year gap, not 5. As for Silverman and Slaughter, technically, if you're following the law, they didn't release their first album until 2018 with Rainbow Edition. This would mean that they didn't start releasing music until 3 or 4 years deep into their part of the relay. This isn't even mentioning L's, which is a compilation of work done before them by the people with the name before them. Why would you release a compilation of things that the people did before you? However, what completely disproves Silverman and Slaughter's existence is Rainbow Edition, their sole, unique 2018 release, which was confirmed to be made by Dean and Nina, not Silverman and Slaughter. Father Ronnie, Dina Francis, Silverman, and Slaughter have never done an interview, never performed live, or done anything like that. This is in stark contrast to Dean and Inga's era, who, though stayed mysterious, did a plethora of interviews and live shows. Not to mention Dean's clear affinity with the name Dina Francis Glass, that he's been throwing around for years. He's used it on many social medias, like his YouTube, his email, and it's at this point where you take a step back. The supposed story of Hype Williams is that Father Rodney and Dina Francis' music was stored in a piñata to be opened in 18 years, before Dean and Inga would take over the name. Do I need to explain to you why that sounds a bit rubbish? In conclusion of the century, the third member of Hype Williams is Archem. However, I can't wholeheartedly tell you that Dina Francis Glass and Father Ronnie don't exist. Maybe the real Hype Williams was the friends we made along the way. Another big shout out to my boy over here on the screen. None of this video would have been possible without him. And also, if you're interested in the stuff I was talking about in the last entry, he goes a lot more in depth on it in his Zine, so DM him if you're interested. I know I haven't uploaded in a while, and hopefully this is the start of a new era. This video meant a lot to me, because Dean is probably my favourite, is my favourite artist of all time. So thank you for watching it, and I'm glad that you enjoyed. Thank you.